Talk to me a little bit about your early life. I know growing up in Los Banos,
Uh-huh.
just you know where you are now with Fresno State Athletics, the broadcasting director there. I mean,
Uh-huh.
was this always the plan for you?
Well, um, growing up there in Los Banos, or where I like to call it the center of the universe, I love playing sports, played any sport my parents would let me, but there was one they wouldn't let me play. They wouldn't let me play football.
Yeah.
And one day we were watching a 49er game on TV, and the announcer said something about my team, the 49ers, and he was wrong. So I said, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And when my dad was done laughing, he said, well, if you think you can do better, maybe you ought to be a sports announcer. And I said, well, how do I do that? He says, get on your bike. And we ride our bikes to the home of a gentleman named Richard Rose, who did all the public address announcing in Los Banos. My dad said, my son thinks that he might want to try this. Can you show him a thing or two? He said, sure, show up, bring your binoculars. So for a couple weeks, I looked through the binoculars and told him who made the tackle. And then he saw an opportunity, and he said, hey, are you ready to start announcing? I said, well, am I? Sure. So at 12 years old, I announced my first football game, and I've been doing it one way or another ever since. So that's one of those things I look back on and say, even though I wanted at the time to play football and they wouldn't let me, I'm very thankful they didn't, and I see it as God's plans being better than mine.
What would you say to you? Being now at Fresno State as the main voice of Fresno State, the football team, the basketball, the baseball. I mean, especially growing up from the Central Valley. I mean, when you get to, I guess, follow in the footsteps too of Woodward, who is
Uh-huh.
a legend here. What's
Yeah.
that make you feel like?
I love the valley.
Yeah.
And every corner of our valley has such unique history and character, and what a privilege it is for me to be trusted by the Red Wave to try to capture or at least caption some of those great moments that the Bulldogs produce. And I grew up listening to Bill Woodward do that with his inimitable voice. And so many of my great memories are listening to him or Hank Greenwald on the Giants or so many others, Lon Simmons with the 49ers, Greg Papa calling the Warriors back then. So I get what it meant to me to listen, and hopefully I never lose sight of that, because it's not about me. It's about the privilege of trying to make someone who's not there feel like they are there, and that's something I'll always be grateful for.
We're in the Veterans Memorial here,
Uh-huh.
the museum. So talk a little bit about how did you get involved with, just the memorial, the honor flight. I know you're a local
Yeah,
founder here of the honor flight. Just how did that come about for you?
sure. So I was very blessed to have my grandparents close by in Los Banos. And one time when I was a kid, I was playing hide and seek, and my brother caught me because I caught my shirt on some frame in the closet. And I turned this frame around, and it's a newspaper from Chicago in 1944, and it says in big red letters, Chicago and saves 26. And it was about my grandfather rescuing 26 people from burning tanks in France. He got the Silver Star for it, one of the highest medals you can get. And that kind of blew my mind a little bit. And I always wanted to be able to learn more about that story. And later on, doing television here in town, hearing all the stories that weigh you down, the shooting, the stabbing, the scandal, the fire, all these things that you don't want to hear. What about some good news? What about some stuff that could inspire us? And so I really felt moved to start capturing the stories of World War II veterans. I interviewed my grandpa and several others, did that on television for many years. I'm still doing it on the radio. And through all that, I became familiar with Honor Flight, wanted to see it happen here. There were a few little false starts, but really what got it going was EECU.
Yeah.
EECU called me and said, we'd like to do a promotion to support a veterans charity. Can you tell me about any? I said, there's this one, there's this one, there's this one. And there's this thing called Honor Flight that we tried to start. We couldn't quite do it. They said, hey, can we do that? So without EECU's commitment, which raised a bunch of money right out of the gate, I don't know if we ever would have gotten off the ground. And because they had the leadership and others stepped up, this all-volunteer organization, supported entirely by donations, has now made it possible, because of the generosity of the people of the Valley, to take more than 1,500 veterans to their memorials in Washington, D.C. And this place here, the Veterans Memorial Museum, home of the Legion of Valor, is one of Fresno's best-kept secrets. It's free admission. There is so much history you can explore here, from the Civil War all the way to today. Local history, military history, and some of the history has legs. I mean, the docents who work here lived it. We have World War II vets, Korean War, Vietnam vets, and beyond who work here, volunteer their time to help others learn that freedom is not free. And really, if you ask, why do I spend so much time working with veterans? It's so we never lose sight of that, because without their sacrifice, we wouldn't have our country, we wouldn't have this community, and in many of our cases, myself included, maybe we wouldn't have been born. Because if those 26 guys my grandpa rescued out of the tanks, if he had been killed in that situation, I would have never existed.
You know, when you go on these honor flights with these veterans, you know, to their memorials, what's that like for you to see them, you know, who maybe have never been there before? You know, you guys are able to take them with Central Valley Honor Flight. What's that like for you, and just the moments that you guys share together?
So if you get me talking about honor flight, it's hard to shut me up because there's so many different ways that this makes a difference. The first thing was, hey, they built this World War II memorial. It was World War II veterans themselves, like my grandpa, who donated to it.
Yeah.
In his case, he never got to see it, and most of these vets never would have gotten to see it if not for something like honor flight to take them there.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's to get them there so they can process, so they can have closure, so they can see what the people of our country have built to honor them, and especially those who died in the service of our country. But along the way, it's a chance for veterans to connect with each other. One of the pieces of feedback we hear so often, I mean, this happens every flight, it's the letter from the wife or daughter or son that says, for all these decades, our veteran wouldn't talk about anything he went through. Then he went on the honor flight, and now we can't get him to stop talking. So it opens them up. It makes them see that what they did does matter, that people are grateful, that it's okay to talk about it, and there are other people that understand. And then it opens up these cross-generational connections. You know, you see young people. If you come to one of our homecomings at the Fresno airport, and we have 4 of them in 2023, so you have your chance to come out there. If you look around that room, here's what you're going to see. You'll see age 0 to 100, and I mean that literally. We have newborns and we have centenarians. You'll see every ethnicity, every racial background, every tax bracket, every religious persuasion, every political ideology, all these things that every day people are telling us, you're not the same, you need to disagree. All those people agree that these veterans deserve our gratitude. So when they come through the door and the bagpipers lead them out and the band is playing, they look out and they see red, white, and blue everywhere. They see that diverse crowd I just described, and all of them are cheering for those veterans. So you can see the most hardened, tough World War II Marine with a tear streaming down his cheek because this is the welcome home he never got before. So in my mind, not only is this a great thing for our veterans, it's a great thing for our community. It shows us what we can do when we find something to unite around, when we all work together. And I think it's just an example for the rest of us of what matters and how special a place we live in.
You kind of mentioned it. This is not the question, but you mentioned it. You know, your grandfather never got to see this memorial.
Right.
So do you kind of take it like, you know, every time you go there, you're kind of honoring him by, you know, he never got to see it, but you're allowing yourself and these other veterans to see that?
Yeah, you know, I think about my grandfather a lot. He was an incredible guy. He was a selfless guy. And I asked him, you know, with regard to that situation where he was awarded the Silver Star, I said, wait a second. If you guys were ambushed, there was nowhere to go, and everyone else was ducking for cover, you and your Jeep driver kept going back in. What were you thinking? He said, what was I thinking? I thought I was going to get killed.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, you wouldn't be around. And that is such a sobering thought, because it's true. So how much would I have missed out on? How much would our community have missed out on if all these guys hadn't made it back? So every veteran has a story like that. There are kids, there are grandkids, there are businesses that they started. They have changed our community in such a powerful way. So I think about my grandfather, and I see every one of these vets in the same light, that their service and their sacrifice is worthy of respect. It's worthy of our gratitude. And they don't always know that. We're taking so many Vietnam veterans on this flight now, and so many will tell you they came home, they couldn't even wear their uniform because they would get yelled at, spit on, called names. This is the complete opposite experience. This is the welcome home they never got before. So yeah, I think about my grandfather, but in my mind, every one of these veterans holds the same place of respect and esteem that my grandfather does.
Another part of your life that people might recognize you from is I know you've done a lot with the National Spelling Bee, you know, on ESPN and stuff. So just, can you talk a little bit about how did you get involved with that? And I know your sister now is, I guess, the executive director, I believe it is.
She sure is.
So just talk a little bit about your role in the National Spelling Bee.
Yeah. Well, there's kind of there's a common theme through all the things that I've been privileged to do, and you're going to hear me say it a lot. It's that God's plans are always better than my plans, because I have ideas, but there's always something that's a little better than what I thought up. And it's that way with my work with veterans, certainly with the privilege of calling the Bulldog games, And the National Spelling Bee is another one of those things. So growing up in Los Banos, I was a competitive kid, would do anything. And when I was in 7th grade, the newspaper there, the Merced Sun-Star for that county, said, we're going to sponsor a spelling bee where the winner's going to get to go to Washington, D.C. So all of a sudden, I had a new goal. And that first year, I didn't quite make it. But the next year, I mean, this was my chance. Our family didn't have a lot of money. My father was on dialysis at the time, waiting for a kidney transplant. And I said, hey, I'm going to win this so we can go to Washington. And it worked out that way. And I would have never dreamed how big a part of my life that would become. So my mom got into it. She coached my sister up. My sister was in it 3 times and almost won it. When I was in college, I'd get to go in the summertime and work at the spelling bee. And then in 2006, I got this phone call out of the blue. A guy said, I'm Bob with ABC Sports. I'm the producer of Monday Night Football and the Indy 500 and Wide World of Sports. And he listed everything I'd ever watched. And he said, and this year, we're going to put the National Spelling Bee in prime time on ABC. We have Robin Roberts from Good Morning America to be our host. But we need someone to announce the competition with her who knows something about it. So I was quiet for about a minute trying to figure out which one of my college buddies was pranking me. And then I realized, no, this was legit. And I must have been the only former spelling bee competitor in the country that was on television anywhere. That's my theory. I was that Venn diagram. But I had the privilege of announcing it that year with Robin Roberts. And over the years, I've worked with the absolute best people in broadcasting. That's been a treat. It's opened the door to other opportunities at the national level. But most of all, what a privilege to see these young people. I'm amazed every single year. Not only are they brilliant, they're dedicated, they're disciplined, and that competition is as intense as any championship game I've called, a national championship in baseball, all that stuff. That spelling bee is intense, it's captivating, and it's something I hope I get to do for a long time. And what a blessing to my family. My younger sister, the year after I started doing it on TV, went to work for the Scripps Corporation, which runs the bee. And just this year, she was named the executive director. So she's going to continue to make a difference in the lives of young people for years to come. And one more thing about the spelling bee, because there have been misconceptions over the years. People say, oh, it's just rote memorization. What good does that do you? The pronouncer of that spelling bee, if you watch it on TV, Dr. Jacques Bailey, he said something years ago that has stuck with me. He said, spelling is a gateway skill. So if you put in the time and the discipline to study for the National Spelling Bee, to be competitive at that level, it's going to serve you well in any field. And I've seen that. I've been doing it long enough. These kids are all grown up and professionals now, and they're, physicists, they're scientists, they're doctors, lawyers, they're baseball writers, they're everything you can imagine. And the spelling bee had a big part of that. So I love that competition. It celebrates education. It helps us all learn. And it shines a spotlight on our future leaders, because these young people are really something special.
I guess, one other question I wanted to ask you, especially here in the Central Valley, Los Banos, people hear it, they know you go through it, to get to destinations, but growing up from there, how much coming from Los Banos mold you into the person you are now? Your upbringing, your parents, your sisters, or your sister, how much did that mold you to the father you are now, to the person you are now?
Boy, that's a great question. When people ask me why I love the Valley so much, it's about the people. And I don't care where you go in the Valley, you're going to find the same kind of people. People that value a firm handshake and looking them in the eye. They value honesty and authenticity. And that's what Los Banos was growing up. It was before the Silicon Valley boom, so maybe 10, 12,000 people. But I knew everybody in town. And those people knew me. And they cared about me. I went to Syracuse University because somebody handed me an article from Sports Illustrated that said, this is where all the great sportscasters go, you should go there. I mean, so many things in my life. It was somebody that we had a relationship with, you played sports with. These were your coaches for Little League or basketball, your umpires, whatever. It was this, we're all in this together mentality. And I think that has stuck with me. And I was especially blessed to grow up in what I would say is a really unique and special family. The older I get, the more I understand how special our family was. My mom and dad were people where faith was their priority. And they didn't just say that, they lived it. And when my dad, who was diabetic from the age of 8, had to close up his shop because his kidney failed, and he had to go on dialysis for 3.5 years before he got a transplant that gave him 8 extra years before he passed away at 51, I saw the community rally around him. People from our church would take him 40 minutes away to the closest dialysis clinic. And I saw him navigate that process of really over a decade slowly dying and having everything taken away from him. He could beat anybody in arm wrestling, and at the end of his life he was really frail. At the end of his life he was blind. At the end of his life, he really had very little physical strength. And even at times, maybe his mind wasn't as sharp as it once was. But the one thing that only got stronger through that process was his faith. It never wavered. And to me, that was such a powerful lesson, that our circumstances don't define who we are or where we're going. And as much as I would love to still have my dad and have him fix my car and wish he would have known my wife and my kids, I'm so grateful for the lesson he taught me and how he handled slowly dying, because it really taught me how to live.
Like you said, you've done a lot already. Voice of Fresno State, do a lot with the honor flight. You do a lot with the spelling bee. Is there anything else that you want to do? Any more, I guess, organizations you're involved with that do good causes, or is there anything else that you have a goal of maybe achieving?
That's a good question. I don't I don't want to beat a dead horse. You've heard me say it before, but I really do believe that God's plans are better than mine. So I know that he has my future planned out. And all the things that I'm most thankful for are things I never set out to do, but he knew I was heading that way. And the one thing that I'll always advocate for is our community and anything that can unite us. I mean, when you're at a Fresno State game and there's 40,000 people cheering on the Bulldogs, that's a powerful feeling. It gives us a hint of what we can do. With the honor flight, we see people from up and down the valley saying, this is worthwhile. We'll put our differences aside and unite around this. So those are the things that really fire me up. If there's a charity that I believe in, I'll do anything to support it. I try to champion Fresno and the Valley and the center of the universe, Los Banos, wherever I go, because, we do get overlooked. People talk about LA and the Bay Area, and we can become flyover country. But we know the Valley feeds the world. There's nothing that won't grow here. And the people that we produce in the Valley are leaders. They're dependable. They're high character. I think we have a lot to be proud of with where we live. So I'll always try to be an ambassador for that wherever I go. And, another cause that I'm passionate about is organ donation. Because my dad got 8 extra years because of someone who died, and he got their kidney. And I wanted to give him one of my kidneys when that kidney wore out so I could extend his life. And he and my mom said, you're too young, you can't do that. But I see that now as God preparing my heart to be willing to do it. So 5 years ago, I was able to share one of my kidneys with my friend, Mike Alexander, who's doing fantastic. And that has connected me to so many people. Because the Valley, believe it or not, is more affected by kidney failure than other parts of the state. And we have a great need here in this Valley. And if people know there's a need, they're willing to step up. So I've met so many other people who have donated organs, or they just, all you have to do is put that sticker on your driver's license. And if something happens to you, you could save multiple lives. So that's another one that I try to spread the word about, not to point any attention at myself, but to say, hey, here's a need that we can all meet if we work together.
I was going to end it there, but you kind of mentioned something about the Central Valley, which I agree with. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
You said that, and we both know the Central Valley feeds the world, basically. Richest agricultural land, in the world, with the green V on the back of the helmet.
Yeah.
But you says that, basically we grow a lot of stuff here in the Valley that changes the world. But do you think that Central Valley gets overlooked with LA and San Francisco? There's a lot of people that grow up in the Valley, so you could say they grow in the Valley that are changing the world right now.
Sure. Yeah, and when that, we'll use cantaloupes for an example, since they grow those on the west side where I'm from, right? That carton of cantaloupes, some of the ripest ones are going to get enjoyed right on the west side, and you can't beat them. But the rest of them, they're going to go to New York, they're going to go to Europe, they're going to go to Asia, they're going to go all over the world. And the same way the Valley feeds the world, I think the Valley can impact the world through the people who grow here. Because if they're grown right, they have that lens. And some of them are meant to stay here in the Valley and make our community better. Others of them can make a difference elsewhere. But I'm just thankful to be in a place that gets it, where those things matter. And EECU is a big part of that. That's why I'll always spread the word about EECU. Without EECU, Central Valley Honor Flight never would have gotten started. I've also had the privilege of many years of emceeing their Excellence in Education Awards up in Merced County. And I just see the value of when we highlight the teachers and administrators who are doing it right, who are making a difference. What an example it is. That's not just about celebrating one person, that's about casting a vision for others to follow. Mm-hmm. So EECU is so much more than just a credit union. They're really intentional about actively making a difference in our community, about making people's lives better, and ultimately making the Valley a better place to live.
And then just finally, for people who want to maybe help out with the Central Valley Honor Flight, donate to it, where can they go? Where can they get more information about it?
Glad you asked. So cvhonorflight.org is our website, CV like Central Valley, honorflight.org. If you go there, you'll find photos from all of our trips. You'll see how you can sign up a veteran to go on the honor flight. It's absolutely free for any veteran who served from the start of World War II to the end of the Vietnam War. If they served at any point within that realm, they're eligible for this free experience. You can sign up to be a guardian on the flight and stay within arm's length of that veteran, and you may get more out of it than the veteran does. And there's a tax-deductible donation that goes along with that. And you can also volunteer, right? We need people for events. Maybe you have a fundraising idea to help make this possible for more veterans. The success of Central Valley Honor Flight, in my mind, is not about any one person. It's not even about, the board members who've been there from the beginning like I have. It's about all of us working together. It's about school kids who meet our vets in Washington and come back to the Valley and say, how can we raise money to get more of them there? It's all over our area, different people with their own unique ideas, and that's what makes it so special.